not a 1 minute sermon, but here we go. All right. So, as I reached over 100 followers on Facebook, I said I would do a small testimony, and I'm going to do my best. I thought doing the sermons in a minute was difficult. Apparently, doing my testimony in a minute or a few minutes is even more difficult because I just want to tell you my life story. And that's not necessarily the information that you need. So I will start with my teenage years. I came up middle class. My mom's from Mexico. My dad's from Ohio. Very hardworking people. They instilled a lot of that into me. I had a kind of an identity crisis in middle school and just went into a bad path. I was incarcerated at 16 through 17 for something violent, and I met God in a weird way. Prior to this, I'd had plenty of supernatural experiences, mostly of the negative variety, almost exclusively of the negative variety, ghosts and things like that. When I got to being incarcerated, I closed my eyes for a second and I saw the scariest face I could imagine, and it struck my body with fear. After that, I knew I needed to do a turn. I needed to do something different. I was given a Gideon Bible, which, if you don't know what that is, it's just a small New Testament Bible. And the strangest thing happened. Every time I touched the book, I would get high. I'd just get this elation. I'm no stranger to drugs and alcohol. I've done those. And so I know what elation feels like, and this wasn't like anything like that. And it blew me away every time I touched one of the books. And I just read this. And it's weird because growing up, we had this like kids Bible, and I knew some of the stories and a lot of the Old Testament stuff, and I just wasn't really familiar with the New Testament. Just didn't. So I was just looking for Jonah, and I'm looking for all these things that I was really familiar with, and it just wasn't there. But what I found was amazing. Matthew really grabbed me. For some reason, that book just was for me. And so that's why I study it so much. Well, coming out of that, I had to work. I got my GED at 17, and I didn't go back to school. It was nothing good for me there. I'm not a really good student either. Anyways, I grab information really quickly, but I'm not into regurgitating on paper. I'm not a good writer or typer. So yeah, I then moved on to cooking. I got into cooking and work, and I went at it I just dug into work, and I didn't really continue on in my faith. But it was always in the background my whole life. It's always just been there. I became a singer of a band, and many bands, and I played at a couple of really cool venues, but my life was still pretty destructive. I was alone. I still, even to this day, sometimes have trouble connecting with people, just some of the way my brain is wired. And I was surrounded by a couple of relationships that really like my parents to this day, and they don't seem to be wavering. My brother and his relationship, really, my best friend that I was living with and his wife were really strong relationships, and I just saw all these strong relationships, and I just knew I wanted help. I wanted someone. Now, one thing that I do have to bring up from my past, though, is that my grandmother, when I was very young, had a stroke, and my grandmother went from being, the matriarch of that part of the family to, disabled. She was in a wheelchair, and my grandfather showed me what real love looks like, and he took care of her. He bathed her, and until she passed, he was there for her, and I saw that. Now, I gave up on love myself. I just said, you know what, maybe it's not for me, and we do have to accept that in some way. Some people it's not for you, and there's nothing wrong with that. As sad as that might sound, there's nothing wrong with it, and I was willing to do that, and I just kind of said, I'm done. And at that point, my wife, Lacey, stepped back into my life. I'd known her for a long time, and we communicated on Facebook, but she needed a job. She needed to get to a job interview, and so I took her, and we haven't been apart since. But her demons and my demons made friends, and it got real weird. And we didn't know what to do, and we looked the wrong places for what to do. We had some family members that dabbled in things that no one should dabble in, and things seemed to get better, and then they would get worse and better and worse, and we just didn't know. So eventually we had to get a poltergeist, or not a poltergeist, but a paranormal investigator in, and their machines were going off the hook. So the fact that they left in a hurry and sent an exorcist. The exorcist came, and when she got to our room, she literally looked at me and said, "Are you an idiot?" And I was just like, I hope not. And she's seeing some of the stuff. We had magic stuff. We were practicing magic. We were trying to. And she says, you can't fight the devil with the devil. You need to get all this stuff out in a specific way. And you need to, stop doing this nonsense. And it's going to take you a long time to get rid of all this stuff, but eventually you'll be better. So my wife knew of a church that was called Church for People that didn't like church. And I didn't like church. So, this was appealing to me, and they played more modern contemporary music. And it was the weirdest thing, because it seemed like no matter what was going on in our life, that message that day was tailored to us. It was bizarre. It just was. And it really started impacting our lives and changing them for the better. And a lot of the crazy supernatural stuff going away, and it's just changing our lives. And one thing about me is when I like something, I don't just kind of like it, I love it. And I get into it and I start researching, and I have that sort of obsession. And that's what Bible became for me. And I just dug. And I eventually kind of put the pieces together with what I was like as a kid, and my stage enjoying and being in front of people and teaching. I loved all that stuff. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm supposed to preach. And so I started going to school. I was still cooking. I've been cooking for over 20 years. I'm pretty good at it. And I had that career kind of going. And then my wife got sick. So she got sick, and so then cooking really wasn't a thing that I was going to do. We had kids, and I was I was spending 60 hours a week at a restaurant that I was making barely $40,000, and in California that's nothing. And just needed to do something else. And I just kept getting this impression I needed to do something in ministry. And so I started going to school, and I was going, and it was great. And all these doorways were opening, and it just seemed like, wow, this is crazy. Because I expected a lot of pushback, and I got none. In fact, 3 of my 5 teachers in my first semester going back were Christians. And I talked to them about that. And it was just blowing me, because it's one of the most science heavy colleges in California. And I was just blown away by this. But then I let things get to me. I let the world draw me away from that. And I was like, well, maybe computers, because there's good money there. I got kids, and, I don't know what ministry money's like. And I kept hearing about fundraising, and I hate asking for money. And there's some people that might find that amusing, but I hate asking for money. And I just have no interest in doing fundraising, because, I don't know, pride maybe, but not into it. So I went another way, and things started just falling apart. Now, that's not to say God hasn't been faithful. We've been in a lot of weird situations, and yeah, I've been incredibly blessed. But it wasn't until I got back on this path that things really started to shine, and I could just feel God's breath. And so I hope that, if you're out there and you're just not sure, or, something's kind of hard in your life, just know, it may be happening for other reasons than what you understand. What happened to my grandmother was devastating, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But I saw what to do when someone gets really sick. Anyways, that's a bit of my testimony. Thank you for watching. Love y'all. Gotta go.